Hey guys, welcome back to Chaos Core Tech. My name's Garrett, and today we are going to be starting the modeling process for Magnemite. Now, if you haven't seen the video where I create the giant Magnemite, that's what we're going to be talking about here, so make sure you watch it. I'll put a link up in the top right corner or down in the description. So basically, I'm going to try and walk you guys through the entire process of modeling, printing, and post-processing this Magnemite. And the first part of this video was supposed to be the modeling process, and I already filmed that once and got into editing it. And I quickly realized that it's going to be extremely long, so I'm breaking that up into smaller parts. And the first video in this series is going to be about planning the model and finding reference images. Now, you're probably wondering why I'm pretty much devoting an entire video to finding images, but this is actually a very important step in the modeling process. So never underestimate finding some good reference images and also taking the time to plan out your model. Alright, so let's get into it. You can see I've got a bunch of images of Magnemite up on the screen here, and I just went to Google Images, typed in Magnemite, and here we are. First of all, we got some really strange images here, like a weird female pregnant Magnemite. There was one that was explicit over here that even made it through the safe search, and I just replaced that with a picture of me so I don't have to censor anything later. But anyway, he has a lot of different source material that we can draw from. And that can be a good thing because there's a lot of images out there of him. And that can also be a bad thing because, especially in cartoons and animes and stuff like that, where things are hand-drawn, a lot of times the proportions won't be 100% true from scene to scene. Those can even differ from like art from different books or video game models. And typically video game models will be okay because they stay pretty consistent throughout the game, usually. But I'll show this to you right here. And actually, we can take these three images right here as an example. This one, I'm not actually sure where this art comes from, but you can see that the magnets are very thin and the screw on top is small. And the one left to it, the screw on the top's a little bit bigger and the magnets are quite a bit thicker compared to the main body here. And then the one to the left of that, the magnets are even thicker yet, and the screw on top is quite massive compared to the other two images. This one, I think, is official art from the Pokemon games. And then down here is also official art, but you can see the proportions are a little bit different there as well. And then if you look at this one right here, this one is actually the 3D model from Pokemon Go. And the proportions here are a little bit different as well. So this can be pretty challenging, and ultimately what you're going to have to do is just pick one and go with it. Luckily, pretty much all of Magnemite's features are on the front of him, so we should be able to get away with just using one reference image for him, because it's pretty safe to assume that the backside of Magnemite is just going to be a gray sphere. So let's just take this image here and sort of identify what we need to do. And Magnemite has three distinct pieces. He has the main sphere that has his eyeball, then he has a magnet on either side, and then he has three screws. So really not that complicated. It really shouldn't be that hard to translate into a 3D model. But when you're working with more complex shapes and objects and characters and stuff like that, you'll want to try and find as many reference images as you can. Try to find ones from different angles from the back, then try to find some close-ups of some specific details that you know you want to get right. And really, the more the merrier here. You can never have too many reference images. Okay, so now it's time to plan out this model. And I don't normally do things this way, but I figured this would probably be the easiest way to kind of demonstrate my thought process. So what we're going to do now is determine how we're going to print this model. And I'm just using paint.net and I'm just going to draw it here. And don't underestimate this step either, because you can skip this step and just start making the model, but more often than not that's going to bite you in the butt. And I actually have a few models that I did that way and I didn't take the time to plan them out, and they actually turned out pretty unprintable. And in order to fix them, I'd have to go back and change the entire model. So take your time here. It'll save you a lot of hassle in the long run. And now this is the point where you really need to determine what you're modeling this for. And really what you need to keep in mind is how you're going to print it. And there's a few different ways you can do it. You can just model the whole thing and then just load it up with supports and print it as one object and just have to remove the supports and clean up the areas around that. That's a totally viable way of doing it. Otherwise, you can slice the model up into smaller pieces that print more easily. But then you usually have to deal with, figuring out how to connect them and seams in places you may not want them. So you have to determine what is your criteria. Do you want it to be in one piece and just prints like that? Are you printing this just to have the printed pieces and you're not going to paint them or anything? Or are you going to be post-processing it and painting it up? Things like that you need to take in consideration. Because think about Magnemite's main body right here. It's a sphere. It's a perfect sphere. And if you've used a 3D printer before, you know that spheres, they just don't print well. You would have to load up with a bunch of support down here, which you can do, or you could split the sphere in half. And that's actually what I ended up doing for this one. Don't forget to take the size of your printer into account and then figure out how big you want to make the object. Now there's infinite ways you can slice something up, but let's just look at the main body for right now. So it's a circle. Sorry for the horrible drawing here. And then it's got a circle basically like this. So you could split it right through the middle like that. But then once you're done printing, there's going to be a seam right there going right through the middle of the eye. And that's where people are going to be drawn to first. So you're going to have to spend a lot of time covering up that seam. It's going to be very difficult to do with these details. And that's not ideal. So actually what I will be doing is still splitting it like this, but with the eye on the top like this. So that way the eye is completely intact and the cut will go around the side. So it'll be on the top, the bottom, and the left, and the right. So it'll still be visible, but a lot of it will be hidden, and it'll make it easier to attach things like the screw on the top and the magnets on the side. So I model for post-processing. I try not to make things too difficult for my wife because she's the one who does all of this. So everything I do is in an attempt to make things easier for her. So you'll be basically printing a dome, a half sphere, like this, and I'm going to be making it hollow on the inside. So you will still need supports for this middle area, but it'll be on the inside, and you won't have to worry about any roughness right here. You just won't see it. Now, looking at the magnets, they're pretty straightforward. I should just be able to print them on one of these sides, and no supports needed or anything like that, and it should be good to go. So let's draw this out, and I'm actually going to use the circle tool because my circles are horrendous. So we've got the main sphere for Magnemite, and then we can draw a sphere on the inside for the eye. And then of course we've got the pupil in there as well. Then we've got some magnets off to the side here, and this will be the same for the other side. So we've got a screw up there, and then we can probably reuse that same screw, just size it down a bit for the feet. And so what we're going to want to do is put a couple holes down here that will allow those screws to go in. Then I knew in the final outcome I wanted these magnets to be able to spin, because that gives Magnemite a little bit of character, and a little bit of wobble will probably help too, because he does move those magnets quite frequently in the show and in the games and stuff like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm basically going to put a little hole like this, and then a hole over here, and there will basically just be a pin with a stopper right here to keep it from falling out. It'll go through this hole, stick out like that, and it'll just be a cylinder. So we can just slide this on, glue it, and then it'll rotate freely. And then once again do that for the other side. And then in the top here we can just create a hole, and if we want this to spin freely we can just do this as well. And then the curve will just come through right there when we put the two pieces together. So then all we have left is the back, which will just be a plain sphere like this. And then we'll have a little hole piece for the sides here, and then the hole on top as well. So that's all we're gonna have for the back piece. The front piece is pretty much the same, with a couple extra holes for the screws and the eyeball. Then we'll have 2 magnets, 3 screws, and 2 pins to hold the magnets in. Overall, that's pretty simple. Okay, so I'm going to leave this lesson here. In the next video, we're actually going to start modeling him in Fusion 360. And now that we have this plan of attack, it should be quite a bit easier. And if you're a little confused at this point, that's okay. It'll make more sense once we're actually in the modeling program and creating it. But the big takeaways from this are find a ton of reference images, get as many details in picture form as you can, and then of course plan your models. Make sure you know what you're modeling them for, how you want them to print, and how big you want them to print. So always keep the size of your printer in mind as well. Okay guys, well I hope this was helpful, and the next video should be coming soon. Thanks for watching guys. I'll see you next time.